I'll do a quick introduction. Guinevere Turner, welcome to Utah Valley University again.
Thank
for
you.
the second time tonight. We just watched the movie with horrible technical issues, but we got through it. We still have a few people here. Some have had to leave because the last train leaves at 9 or something, 10. But the most important people are still here. And so we're going to ask you some questions.
How many people am I talking to?
And what?
How many people am I talking to?
Oh gosh, there's about 25. It's not a big group. 150, they're saying, yeah. The nice thing is, yeah, you just look here, Guinevere, just stay here. No, there's a good size. And they'll come up and they'll all engage you with good questions.
Okay.
So tell us again, we were talking before we got interrupted about you and Mary, how you met, and then how you got kind of recruited onto this project, because I know it wasn't like something you were actively working at doing.
No, so Mary Heron is the director and my collaborator on the film. She was in, making her first film, which is I Shot Andy Warhol, and we had the same producer. I had just finished my film, Go Fish. We ended up in the same room. We actually ended up talking about, she wanted to make a film about Bettie Page, the pinup girl, which we did. We started to do, and then while that was happening, she was approached to do American Psycho. And it's a book, and she was approached to adapt the book and direct it. And I hate scary movies and hate scary things, and she knows that about me. We're good friends, we still are. And she said, "You're gonna hate me, but I promise you, if you read this book, you will agree with me that there's a good movie in here somewhere." And so I said, okay, and then I read it, and I said, yes, I hate you, and I hate Brett Ellis, I hate everyone who championed this book, and I hate everything. But I can see that this is going to be a good movie. And so we got to work on it. It is extremely challenging. It's just a really challenging book to adapt. All of the scenes where he talks about music are in the movie are actually just first person, no narrative. They read like music reviews. So we loved them. We were trying to figure out how to integrate them into a cinematic, into a plot. And then just when we were ready to go and we had cast Christian and we were waiting for, I don't know what we were waiting for, just probably money or final notes from Lionsgate. We got it was announced in Variety that Leonardo DiCaprio was going to star in the movie, and that Lionsgate had offered him $35 million, which by the way is like maybe 6 times what the actual budget of the film is. What it would be. And so and Mary said, I don't want to direct a Leonardo DiCaprio film. It was just after Titanic had come out. And she said, she'd already committed to Christian. Christian was already working out like a demon. And she said, if I direct Leo DiCaprio's first movie off of Titanic, it's going to be a team of people around him telling me what to do. And that's not the kind of director I am. And I'm just not interested in making that movie. So then they gave it to Oliver Stone, and then Oliver Stone started, having readings, and Mary said to the people who were cast in her movie, who also did readings for Oliver Stone, "That's nice, they're not going to be in the movie." And we went through a whole, rigmarole, and eventually it all came back to her because eventually somebody took Leo DiCaprio out of having that be the next movie he did. So then we were back.
I just lost that last bit. I'm sorry.
Somebody talked Leonardo DiCaprio out of the idea that coming off of Titanic with a bunch of, avid, insane teenage 13-year-old girl fans, that maybe doing a serial killer movie next was not like the best career move.
Right.
I don't have to agree with that person. Just because those girls were all going to flock to see whatever he did next. And I would agree that that's not the audience we were really going for. I don't think it's really made for a 13-year-old mind of any gender.
None that I want to know.
So anyway, so that's the story of, and then the story of me being in it is simply that I'm writing it with Mary and having the requisite nightmares, and it's a horrible book. And not only it's a horrible book, we had to read it. You have to read a book over and over and read passages out loud to each other and say, well, this horrible thing would be funny if, but do you know what I mean? It's like not an easy process, especially if you're me. And I don't watch horror movies if I don't have to or even thrillers. But then, you know, the character that I play is a Sarah Lawrence girl. She's directly, almost completely, everything she says comes exactly from the book. And I just said,
oh, I didn't know that. I assumed that was just you guys, you adding that in.
no, she says she's Sarah Lawrence, and are you a lesbian? And blah, blah, blah. I mean, I was just like, Mary, this is too funny. You just have to let me play this character. I refuse to write another word unless I get to play this character. She just is a person that I knew. Like, she's well written. That is the kind of girl that I went to school with. So
yeah, let's give a little background here. That Guinevere did go to Sarah Lawrence, and in fact,
unlike the character says, I'm not a lesbian, Patrick. I actually am a lesbian. That makes it extra funny. And you know that everything about my style and demeanor in the character is not me at all. Yeah. But was extremely fun to play.
Yeah,
you know, the doing a sex scene is already difficult. Doing a sex scene where you get killed is one of the hardest days at the office that I've had as an actor.
I bet. Okay, so let's ask this, because I don't really know what the answer to this is. And because I've read some things without actually reading them, you know, how you like look at headlines and blurbs and then you go, oh yeah, that looks like an interesting thing to read, and then you don't read it. So there's been a lot of comments about American Psycho written by you guys and directed by Mary, has, you know, and the impact of the female perspective on this particular film, you know, and why, and what do you think that impact is, and how much of it is just natural because you guys are writing it and happen to be some ladies, and how much of it is, you know, were you actually thinking about, hey, it's kind of cool that we're writing this because if Mr. Stone was writing this, it would be totally different, or whatever. What, you know, talk about that.
So we were the 6th team of writers to be asked and paid to try to adapt it. So at that point, I think, in retrospect, although this is not what we were thinking at the time, they probably, you know, in a sort of strategic move, they thought, oh, we'll get women to be a part of it, so that if anyone says it's offensive or misogynist, we can be like, but ladies wrote it, how can it be offensive? But at the time, we really saw what, hilariously, Bret Easton Ellis, who wrote the book, really thought he was writing a feminist book. Right. And he thought it was this indictment of men and male culture and, you know, the commodification of women, you know, in this sort of exaggerated, hyper real world in which, you know, this guy is trying so hard to stand out to the other men in his life that he's going to these extremes and no one gives a fuck anyway. So we sort of, I think that Bret Ellis failed. I mean, just in making a feminist book, because obviously he goes so far. The book is just endless pages of graphic sex that turns into endless pages of graphic violence. But we saw the skeleton, so I feel like we can't take full credit for it becoming what I think is a very feminist movie. I think we just saw what he was trying to do, and then Mary was able to put it on the screen. But I also think Mary can be, you know, a cheeky director, and I think that she's like, let's make this, let's get this handsome man, Christian Bale. Let's encourage him, and, you know, you don't have to ask twice with Christian Bale to get a flawless body, and then let's endlessly objectify it and have a gratuitous shower scene, because and a scene of him doing crunches, because that's what happens to women in film all the time. Like, we don't need that for the plot. Let's just soap him up and look at that perfect body. And so in that way, I mean, it cracks me up, because those kinds of shots aren't written in the script. That's just Mary on the day being like, who doesn't want to see that body? Let's do it. And so in that way, I think it has a sneaky kind of cheeky feminism to it as well.
Absolutely. Yet one that probably your biggest fan base are a bunch of dudes.
Gay men and heterosexual women who are just, you know, happy to admire that body. I don't think anyone who I mean, it's pretty impressive. He sort of made himself into like a, you know, Roman statue. It's kind of just, you know, as Mr. Bale went on to prove, he could pretty much put his mind to whatever he wants his body to look like.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Well, tell me about your experience. You are currently on a a teaching gig
Yeah,
at St.
one more
Lawrence,
week.
teaching screenwriting, almost over. And I want to know how it's gone and what you've found student writers need to know.
What do student writers need to know? I find myself saying, you know, I do a lot of consulting and mentoring and stuff, but I've never spoken specifically to this age group, and most of them new to it completely. I find myself saying that anything that happens to a character because they stumble upon it or because someone tells them that moves the plot forward is something you need to rethink. If it's the big thing, then it has to be from there because they actively did something. Whether it be a bad choice or whether it be that they're looking for one thing and they find another, like it has to be the big things that happen to your character should always be about them actively getting it, whatever it is. Unless you're writing a movie about a person, a character who it's all about how they do nothing and things just happen to them. Like Forrest Gump, for example, a pretty popular movie, but he did choose to run across the country. So that's the number one thing I tell them. And then also, you do not have to start with knock, knock. Oh, please come in. Sit down. I want to have a conversation with you about X. You can jump right into the middle of the conversation about X.
Right. Okay, so those two things, first of all, to sum up, is that main plot points and character choices need to be actually things that happen, that the protagonist does, as opposed to things that happen to them.
Yeah.
And you can get into a scene a lot sooner and get out of it probably sooner than most people tend to do.
Yes.
Out of habit.
Yeah.
New writers.
And what else do I say? I just spoke with 6 students individually about their projects today. I'm trying to think of what my themes were. Today's menu was, I don't think that anyone is going to forgive a mother in a sci-fi movie about a giant robot if she has to make the choice between her children and she consciously makes the choice and chooses one of them and the other one dies in the first 30 pages of the movie.
Yeah, that sounds like a end of the movie sort of choice.
Or it just sounds like a movie like the movie Sophie's Choice, which is all about a woman who made that choice, and it's about a real character study and the torture of living with that choice, not about a giant robot that's trying to take over the world. I'm trying to help him find the balance in his genre, basically.
Right, exactly.
Deep character stuff that you're going to have to live with, and no giant robot. The giant robot is not going to be important anymore. And the whole class tried to tell him, don't kill the cute girl that you made so wonderful, and he's like, she has to die. I'm like, okay, live with your choice. That's the other thing that I tell them a lot is just if I ask you a question about a character, like, well, how did she get that prosthetic arm? Real conversation. And you say, oh, I'm not really sure. I just figured. I'm like, nope, wrong answer. You need to, if you have a prosthetic arm, that means, oh, there's a whole huge thing that happened to you at some point that has really affected who you are. And that's a really specific story, and you, even if it never comes up and it never comes out of her mouth, you need to know the answer. And you need to go online and look at chat rooms of people with prosthetic limbs and see and what are their experiences in daily life. And then he's like, yeah, like I guess like if you had a prosthetic arm, and people might say thank you for your service all the time, and then if you weren't actually in the military, it would be awkward. And I'm like, exactly, specificity is everything. So right. So that too, you can't not know everything about your character. Otherwise, you're not writing them well. Yeah. And it's to a lot of people it's counterintuitive because you might know things about them that nobody else knows. None of your characters know. Nobody watching the movie knows, but you need to know.
Right. Thank you. Perfect. I'm going to ask one more question and we'll turn it over. And that is, so tell us about what's kind of going on. You've been teaching. Are you? Oh, actually, that's this specifically. Tell me about the. You and Mary have worked together multiple times. Okay, mm-hmm. So you did this, and you mentioned Bettie Page, but why don't you bring that up? That's a movie that I know is at the library because I ordered it, and I've stocked the library with good Guinevere Turner movies, and You should watch that. You should watch Go Fish, which is amazing. But you've got something else coming. What?
We did the notorious Bettie Page again. We wrote it together and she directed it. And then I wrote on my own. I wrote a screenplay about the women who killed poor Charles Manson and went to jail and are still in prison 45 years later. And it's about their time in prison.
Right. I thought she was on that, writing that with you, but she's not. It's just you.
No, this will be the first time I've written something that she directs.
Oh, okay, I see.
So she's directing it, and we're shooting it, if all goes well, which it really does, or on schedule in the film world, in July 2017.
That's wonderful.
We're going through the casting process right now, which is very difficult. And for me also, I disagree with the strategy, which is to get the actor that's going to play Charles Manson first. He's not really, like, they're in prison already. He's not with them. He lives in flashback, so I feel frustrated that they think that's the most important part of the movie.
Right.
But whatever. I'm not a casting director. They might be right.
Right.
Maybe it's written so brilliantly that a huge actor would take a smaller part. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm sure it is written so brilliantly. Of course it is. How could it not be? Okay, well, I'll probably think of one or two for the end, but why don't you guys come on up here, and if you have a question, why don't you come and sit up here while the other person asks some questions, so we don't have to wait for you to walk down all the time. So thank you, and guys, say your name so she knows who you're talking to, and thank you.
Oh, all right.
Hi.
Talk about first. Hey, how you doing?
Good.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question about. Oh, thank you.
What's our name?
Well, my name is Bryce Allred. I've been in Duane's class all semester. This is my first semester as a film major here at UVU. So before I ask my question, I have another question kind of about screenwriting. I'm not quite sure of the process that goes into the soundtrack completely, but when it came to the songs that go over the murder scenes, were those songs specifically written into the script by you, or was that somebody else's job to come up with those songs?
Well, it's an interesting question in the case of this movie because it's an adaptation of a novel, as you know, and those specific artists and a lot of that specific dialogue was in the book. And so this is not always the case with a movie, but it was so specific and so funny that we just went with the artists that he was talking about in the hopes that we would get the rights to those artists, to Huey Lewis. But, you know, there's a whole thing that he says about Phil Collins. We couldn't get the rights to Phil Collins songs. You will notice when he's talking about Whitney Houston, you think you're hearing The Greatest Love of All, but there's this really clever thing called the sounds alike, where if you don't get the rights, and we didn't get the rights to The Greatest Love of All or any of Whitney Houston's music, a composer makes something that sounds like it, and the fact that he's holding up the CD and talking about it, it totally tricked your brain probably to think that you were hearing that song.
Yeah,
I mean, or maybe you don't know that song that well, so it doesn't, but it tricks people who are familiar with that song. But normally I would say I would never write, especially a really famous piece of music, into a movie if you really want to get that movie made. However, if you're learning screenwriting and it really conveys the scene to you, it's fine to put it in there. And of course, but I would say if your whole plot is around a really famous song and you need to hear that song, that's not a great idea.
You don't think that'd ever work out correctly if you decide?
Well, is it in any way fun of the song, or if it's just such a famous song that it would literally cost you, $100,000 to get the rights to that song, it's just like shooting yourself in the foot. You know
Okay.
what I mean?
Okay, well, I'm glad you answered that. It actually nixes my original question. I didn't know the process. My original question was why those songs specifically.
Oh, yeah.
But if they were mentioned in the book, and
they're also really, like, he thinks he's really cool, and they're really, really dorky. In my opinion, and in the book's opinion, and the movie's opinion, they're kind of not that cool artists to be passionate about.
Yeah. As Duane mentioned, when we first watched this, we had audio problems. So majority of the time when it came to those scenes, the music was completely gone and we were reading the lyrics on the screen. And it actually fascinated me that the lyrics to those songs were very pertinent to the situation. So I'm sure the author had that in mind when he put those in there. I didn't know that, and I thought
Oh, it's just like the hip to be square, right? The greatest love of all. Is there another one? Oh, it is Phil Collins. It's In the Air. No.
Yeah, specifically hip to be square. But I actually thought it. Truth be told, this was my first screening of American Psycho. I'd been seen bits and pieces here and there, and I thought that it was actually a directing choice to leave those pieces out and just to have. We had white noise, basically, just this booming white noise when we were watching, and I thought that was the direction. Yeah, I thought that was the direction Mary wanted to go. Was him give this whole spiel about how beautiful these songs are, and then when he puts them on before he murders them, it's just this white noise. Because truth be told, I think watching it, it was the best depiction of a serial killer I've ever seen in any movie. Because when it comes, I love psychology. When it comes to psychopathy, he starts out the movie saying, I don't feel anything, or I'm not really a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gives all of these speeches, well, he says that, lets everybody know he's separate from society, but when it comes to psychopathy, they still want to fit in, so they fabricate things, and they seem to stick hold of aspects that they think will make them seem more human. Mm-hmm. So with him taking these people in and explaining and giving these heartfelt speeches about why these songs are so brilliant, and then just to have it go into this white noise is a perfect example of psychopathy. Because
this is all a perfect example of the fact that how much the brain wants to make sense of art, even when it's not. You know what I mean? Which is not in any way to downplay what you're saying, because it's just
no offense.
It's so not the intention, and because if you see it in a theater, like that music is so present and so booming, and so it's gonna crack up the director when I tell her what you just said to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was just fantastic, because you have music which is supposed to inspire, and then to a psychopath it doesn't mean anything.
It's nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So even though it was audio difficulties watching the movie, I thought it was brilliant.
That's funny.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Always a pleasure.
Next.
I can't see myself. Oh, hello.
Hi.
I'm short. Sorry.
I am too.
Okay. Yay. First of all, I have several friends who went to Sarah Lawrence, so hooray for that.
How cool we are.
Yeah. Second of all, so thinking about like some of the themes of the movie, like masculine fragility and male vanity, and kind of the detachment to reality of these like rich Wall Street types. It's like very easy to read it, as you were saying, as like a kind of like feminist overtones to the entire thing. I've read the book, and the book is just like relentlessly like violent, just like goes on, and like it's like the most like fucked up stuff I've ever read.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. When I met Brett Ellis for the first time, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "What the fuck is your problem?"
Yeah. Yeah.
We're friends, so it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah. So I kind of have two questions. They're kind of related, kind of not. So the first one is, where do you, in adapting something so relentlessly violent and visceral as that, where do you kind of like walk the line and draw the line on what you are going to depict and what you're not? Because I mean, the movie, I guess, can be seen as controversial as well. Not quite as controversial.
Well, we had that conversation, and because I'm like, I just can't write. I can't write a gruesome, grisly, graphic, but violently graphic. I'm tired. Anyway, you know what I mean. Movie with graphic violence. I just can't write that. I don't want to write that. I don't want to be a part of that, and I'm not, actually just not capable of it. I don't think I'd be good at it. And Mary is the same way. And so, the things that moved us and interested us in the books was not the violence. I mean, it's interesting because it's just so over the top. So we made this conscious decision through a conversation that we were going to have very little actual violence on screen, and that our goal was really to kind of show right before something really horrible happens and right after. And in doing that, kind of implicate the audience. It sort of leaves something up to your imagination. You kind of imagine the worst, but also it lets us off the hook. We're like, well, I didn't write that, and why did you show you that? That's just what you thought. So now we're all in this together.
Yeah.
But then that said, we did decide that we also didn't want to look like the chicks who were too afraid to do that we were doing it for a reason. So we're like, but we got to just do an homage to a horror movie and just have that one scene with the guy with the chainsaw chasing down a woman in her undies down the hall, like, just to be like, we get it, we can do this too. And so that's why we had that one scene. But other than that, I mean, I may have lost perspective. I was at a screening like last year, and I talked a woman into. I was like, it's really not. It's more of a satire than a scary movie. You should really come. She's like, oh, I don't like movies like that. I'm like, no, it's not scary. And then I was sitting there next to her, and I was like, ugh, I've completely lost perspective. It is kind of scary.
Yeah.
And I get killed. I mean, it's just like I'll never do that to a woman again.
Yeah. So actually, I guess I have two more small questions. So then the next one is, I've noticed that there's a big fan base for this movie of straight white dude bros who actually kind of idolize Patrick Bateman in a way. And yeah. I'm just wondering your thoughts on the irony of that.
Well, it's funny, and it seems like a new generation, because this movie came out 16 years ago, so there's a new crop of, students in my class who are 18 to 22 who are huge fans of it, and that, that's also, people who are my age and, in between. I think it is very ironic because that's exactly who we're making fun of. I mean, I've had on numerous occasions, first of all, guys go, wait, you wrote that? Like, yeah, I did, because that would be a really weird thing to lie about. And two, they say, like, wow, dude, I am Patrick Bateman. I'm like, I don't know if you're telling me if you're a serial killer or a dork, but either one, like, you're not getting the movie. Like, this is not an aspirational character. This character is, in fact, aspiration embodied. Like, he is a loser, and he's trying so hard to be cool, and he's failing. So it's funny. I find it very ironic. It makes me laugh every time. I mean, when people say that, depending on my mood, I usually just say that he's a serial killer, but more importantly, that he's not a cool guy.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so then my last question, and I'm sorry to ask you this, but the movie mentions Donald Trump 2 times. And now that Donald Trump is our president, I'm wondering...
No, it's not. That's what you're not allowed to say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to happen. I'm wondering your thoughts on how the themes of this movie can inform our current situation in American society and American culture.
Oh, dude. I think it's, it seems to be, it almost now when this kind of man and this kind of world and these kind of priorities are actually a matter of life and death, the movie might seem a little lighthearted. Mm. But to our credit, we made it in the year 2000. We really made it in the late 90s when the possibility of a Patrick Bateman-like person, but not as hot, being in the White House was the farthest from our minds. So I saw the French newspaper Libération, which is like their sort of alternative paper in Paris. Mm-hmm. It said American Psycho in French, and it had a picture of Donald Trump, and it literally made me burst into tears. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be with him in any way. I was like, what have I done?
All right. Well, I'll stop torturing you. So thank you for answering my questions. It was fun to talk to you. Bye.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
How's it going? So my question is the writing. When you're writing and adapting a character from a book, how much of like character development and stuff do you think you have the freedom of creating for the script versus going off of the book? Does that make sense? Yeah. Like you're talking about how you have to know everything about your character, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, when you're dealing with you know, an actual source material, in this case, making up, it's really, really case by case basis. But in the case of Patrick Bateman, it's like the thing about the character is that there's kind of no person there. Do you know what I mean? So giving him we actually gave him less of a life. In the book, he has a brother, and he actually has a little bit more humanity. So he's an exception, though. I mean, he's just an exception all around. You know, normally people say you have to find something to like about the character, but in this case, maybe not. Although, what I think is interesting is that when he's about to get caught, you do weirdly, I think, find yourself kind of feeling stressed out for him. Maybe that's just me. But anyway, so I would say that in real life, if you're making the person up, you have to know everything. If you're adapting from a book, you have to find, like, I think, why the writer invented the person in the first place, and make sure you stay true to that. It's the same for when you are writing about a real person, a real life person, and doing a biopic. You have to, like, there's this very nebulous idea of staying true to a character. Why are you trying to adapt something?
Are you trying to adapt something?
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
No, I just, you know, just want to learn more about writing in general, I guess. And then last question for me is just dealing with when you write a script and give it to a director, do you only give your scripts to, like, people you trust to direct them, or do you, like, how do you deal with that, you know?
I have been extremely lucky, and by lucky I mean my experience is not that of most writers, because the first film that I wrote that became a movie, I wrote it with the director, and she was my girlfriend at the time, and we were, you know, I was producing the movie, so all kinds of power. The next two movies were with my friend Mary Herron, who is, you know, I can be as much a part of the movie as I want to. I can be a part of casting, I can be on the set, I can do whatever I want. Never the case with writers. And then the other two movies I did, one is just too crazy of a story to go into, but I encourage everyone in this room to watch a documentary called Tales from the Script, which is a documentary on Netflix. It's about screenwriters, and I've interviewed, and that's a whole crazy story about a crazy person that I worked with. But other than that, I've just been really lucky. So that everything I've written has been for and already with a director in mind that is my friend, or that director has come to me. But generally speaking, writers are just happy that anything they've written is getting made, and they have zero power. If someone buys your script, you have zero power after that. So I'm charmed, really.
Nice. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you. It was great hearing you talk and talking to you.
Nice to see you.
Have a good night. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Reg Flake. Nice to talk to you again. I saw you came when you came on UVU campus. Got to hear from you, so that was cool. My question is kind of at the end of the movie, right? I'm kind of confused, and so my question is not necessarily about. I don't need you to clear up my confusion, but my question is, as a writer, when there's maybe some moments in this where I feel cheated as an audience, maybe, or where you're kind of you leave the audience hanging, or all those kind of things. How do you approach that? How do you approach, like, I guess, taking your audience in a direction, almost lying to them, but not lying to them? I know you didn't lie to us, but you know.
Well, I feel very strongly about what you're asking, because I always say I always say to students, you never want your audience to feel cheated. That's cheating. Cheating's not cute. And it should be said that Mary and I agreed, the director of this film, that we didn't, even though the book does leave it incredibly ambiguous, that we hate movies that were all in someone's head, and we hate movies that were all a dream. We hate it. It feels like a cheat. We were not going to make that movie. And to us, we didn't. but to the rest of the world, it's still ambiguous. And we have a joke how we failed so miserably, and the one thing we knew, we were like, it's not, it's gonna be real. He's really gonna be killing people. And here's the explanation. We decided that at some point what you're seeing is going to be him kind of losing his mind. So what you're seeing on the screen is what he's perceiving. But the ATM doesn't really say feed me a stray cat. And when he shoots the cop car and it explodes, he looks at his gun like, what just happened? Like even he can't believe what's happening. So he's unraveling. But he is really killing people, and that's what we wanted it to be. And I don't know if we had it too over how we would make that more clear, because it doesn't exist in a totally grounded reality. It's a hyper real movie. He doesn't really ever work.
Sure.
You literally never see him work, and that's obviously by design. You know what I mean? Like, who is he? So I am sorry that you feel cheated by it, but I would never intentionally. Plot twists are one thing, but they have to make you want to go back and watch the movie and go, that's where that was, and they have to be satisfying, and they have to make you want to see the movie twice, not make you go, what a rip. You know what I mean?
Well,
that said, one of the greatest movies of all time, The Wizard of Oz, was all in her head. But we forgive it.
I suppose after you tell me like your explanation, I think rewatching it, I can see more elements that could, communicate that. So that's cool.
Well, I mean, that's supposed to be when he's confessing and stuff. It's just that it's this sort of, the metaphor for this guy. Like, these people are so shallow and nothing means anything. They can't even tell each other apart. And you could literally kill someone and confess, and it'd still be like, that's hilarious, and move on. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's where people get tripped up. It's like the guy doesn't even, how can you have lunch with someone and not know who they are? Like, this is a reality in which that's possible.
Gotcha. So my second question is, how do you approach co-writing? It seems like you've done a lot of that. What is that? How does that process usually work for you guys?
It's different for every collaborator. I just finished writing a fourth thing with Mary that I haven't even talked about, and I thought, we've been writing together for 20 years, and I was like, you know what? It's more important than a partner. It's more important than anything. To be able to just sit across the table from someone and exchange ideas is a rare and special thing. And I have tried to collaborate with people where it didn't work, because it has to be a sort of match of kinds of egos. Because you have to find someone that you can say, no, that's not a good idea, and here's why. And nobody gets offended or defensive. You just listen and you build on each other. And it's really magical, because some people can't handle it, or some personalities just don't mesh that way. When I met Mary, she was, single and just, drinking with me in New York. And now 20 years later, she has teenage daughters and she's married to a guy. And you know what I mean? Like, but we still are just right where we were when we first met. And there was just a chemistry of creativity. And it's different. I've collaborated with other people. Some people really say, you write this scene and I write this scene, and then we'll get back together. And the way Mary and I write is very much in the same room, and we just go, shh, I got it. And then we read it. Oh, okay, but what about, it's very sort of in person, and with passing a computer back and forth and scribbling notes while the other one's talking. And I like to make charts, and she's always like, Gwen, what a brilliant chart. And you know what I mean? We're like, we're a really good partnership that way. But she's like, how did you think of that? Or she'll just like, I don't know what to do with this. And I'll just be like, I got it. And I'll write a piece of dialogue. She'll, oh, Quinn, that's brilliant. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty good at what I do, right? So, but most people are, a lot of people are let's make an outline and go into separate, into our respective corners and write a bunch of scenes. But I find that disjointed, because there's a whole other layer of having to make them make sense together, But not everybody can stand to be in a room with another person while they're being creative. You know what I mean? That's a whole other question about what kind of writer you are, what makes your creativity flow,
So when you decide to co-write with somebody, is this kind of communicate together like how you want to approach it, or how does that usually work? Or does this happen naturally?
If you don't know the person, though, you can just propose something and see if it works for you. Do you know what I mean? Because you could say, let's do it this way, but then, you know, after you're in a room with them for 3 hours, they drive you insane. That's what happens to me. Everyone drives me insane. Or you can say, you never know how, you know, if someone's going to just really argue with you over whether the coat is blue, and 5 hours are going to go by, and you're just like, who cares about the coat? Let's talk about, you know, the third act. So, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like going on a road trip with someone. You're not really going to see their true colors till day 3, and you're going to be like, would you stop saying that? You know what I mean? It's just, you know, it's a big gamble. It's like dating.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Let's do, we got one. Yeah, we got 2 more questions here. Does that sound all right?
Sure. I've come this far.
Hi, my name is Lucas Barros, and I was wondering, what's your process for writing and like coming up with new ideas and what you decide to actually write about in the story you want to tell?
Interesting. One thing I love about what I do is it pretty much gives me an excuse to do anything, watch anything, go anywhere, and ask anyone questions. So I would say that my first approach to where I get ideas is all of that. And reading, and watching every single movie ever, and always feeling like there's more movies that people, you know how there's certain movies when you bring them up, you say you haven't seen them, and people go, what? You've never seen? I think Blue Velvet's the one that's killing me right now. I've never seen Blue Velvet. So how do I decide what to actually do? I don't know. I have like 1,000 notebooks. I always have a notebook with me. I'm always, you know, writing half-baked ideas down, and sometimes they end up being part of the same story, even though they're 2 separate ideas. But luckily for me, what happens most is that I am asked to do things. I was asked to do Bettie Page. I was asked to do American Psycho. I was asked to do Go Fish was my idea, but I was asked to do the movie that I just did about the women who killed for Charles Manson. But what I was asked was simply write a movie that focuses on the women. And it was my idea, after a lot of work and research, to talk about when they were in prison, because no one's ever talked about that. So, I mean, one of my favorite things about what I do is research as well. You know, those rabbit holes. That's another thing you can do. You have an excuse to do. Just spend hours on the internet. Just be like, what about this? What does this mean? I wonder where that came from. So it's a never-ending, ongoing process where it's sort of what I'm thinking about when I wake up in the morning. You know, what's still in my head, or you know, I look through an old notebook and be like, what was I even talking about? That makes no sense, and who cares? It'll be really interesting for me actually, because next week I go to a 6-week artist residency where you literally just are alone in a studio all day long. And that's when I did it last year as well. And that's when you're like, do I have any ideas? Really, I've just been dying to write a romantic comedy that has talking animals that are assholes. And I really hope that I get to do that. I've been talking about it for like 2 years now. And just imagine a romantic comedy that's just a regular romantic comedy, but then there's all these animals that are always just saying really shitty things. That's been a good movie.
My other question is too, do you have any advice for people that want to write screenplays?
There's so many ways to go with that question. I would say soldier on bravely. You will hate, if you get past page 30, you will hate it. At some point, if you don't hate it at some point, you're not doing it right. You know what I mean? If you're writing the whole time going, this is awesome, I'm a genius, no. Self-doubt is a huge, important part of the process. And that it's very, very easy to start a screenplay, and what separates the girls from the women is those of us who finish them. And what separates the great ones, the good ones from the great ones, is those of us who are willing to rewrite them. I mean, literally, like every movie that I've written that has become a movie has been rewritten 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times. Like really, really being committed to the story, and knowing when to walk away, and knowing that people like the guy who created I think it's Mad Men. Vince Gilligan? No, that's Breaking Bad. Matt Weiner, the guy who created Mad Men, he was trying to sell that idea for 9 years.
Wow.
That just to know that there are people who are considered, the great creators of the moment or of recent years who couldn't convince people that they had a good idea. So that's the other thing, it's a lot of work. It's not like anyone who says like, oh, I just had this really great idea and I wrote it in a week is full of shit. I just don't believe them.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, last one.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
What's your name?
My name is Tyler Walker.
Hi,
and
Tom.
So my question isn't so much about getting advice, so I apologize if you're hoping to have all your questions be about that.
No, not
but
at all.
so
I was for a living, so I'm not dying to give more advice.
I've heard that Christian Bale based his character off of Tom Cruise.
Interesting.
And I was wondering if there's any stock in that, or if there was any sort of, yeah, go ahead.
Christian said that he was studying Tom Cruise, but that he was actually really studying his lawyer. He had a lawyer who to him really embodied like the perfect kind of like super pro, like go-getter kind of American man. And that's whose accent he was imitating. And that's whose kind of physicality he was imitating. But I mean, there's so much mention of Tom Cruise in the book that I think that story might have been conflated with the fact that the character, and I think they go into it more in the book, that Patrick Bateman was modeling himself after Tom Cruise, not Christian Bale.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I think that somewhere that might have gotten, Christian as Patrick would understand that Patrick was emulating Tom, if you get what I mean. There's a distinction between like directly imitating Tom Cruise. He's imitating Patrick Bateman, imitating Tom Cruise, because he's that deep in Christian as an actor, and I mean that completely sincerely. That guy just is pretty incredible.
Like Inception level acting.
Exactly.
Second follow-up question. Christian Bale embodied a psychopath so well in that film. Were you guys ever nervous about that at all during filming?
Well, we did actually. It's funny that you asked that, because we had a moment, because he, Christian, the whole time we were shooting, camera rolling or not, spoke in that accent, acted like that. I mean, within reason, he and I did a sex scene where he kills me, so he was not in full Bateman mode for that. He was being, a fellow actor, making sure that we were doing it right, and that he was super nice. Actually, we were cracking up at the point. But he did always speak in that accent, and he did not socialize. And we were doing a table read before we started shooting, and there he was, and he had completely transformed his body, and he had transformed his teeth, and he had started speaking that way, and he was always alone when he wasn't working, and he was on the phone, and he was literally talking to a video store about getting videotapes, and he was talking about the Chainsaw Massacre, because he was really renting them and watching them, and Mary and I just looked at each other, we're like, ew, we're in the room with Patrick Bateman right now, and then we rehearsed the scene, and so we were like, how deep does Christian Bale go with his research? Is he like out in the streets of Toronto, picking up chicks in clubs? And we were just like, no, he's not. We can't believe that. Yeah. So, but it was a bit eerie to be around him, and it was hilarious at the rap party when he, started being himself and talking in his accent. That most of the crew was like, why is Christian talking in that weird British accent? We're like, that's how he really talks. He seems like that. He's a scientist of an actor for sure.
That's crazy. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Guinevere, we have one person who cannot be held back, so we're going to do one really quick.
I wonder what that
He's backed up. He's backed up. Okay. All right. Well, we're all done. Thank you so much.
I don't mind.
Sure, Adam? It's okay. If it's okay. She said it's okay.
Fine, yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah. Hi.
So just really quick question that you kind of touched on a bit, and it's just how the best way to perfect writing as a screenwriter, just things you can do to get as good as you can be. Because I've heard things of like people that travel the world and all that stuff, and they feel inspired after that. And
well, that's interesting. I mean, you can. I think, as I was saying, anything and everything that you can do, experience, and absorb is a good place to start, and as good as an ongoing practice. But I also think, on a very practical level, if it's specifically, not inspiration in general, but screenwriting that you want to study, it is very easy to get screenplays online of TV and films that you love, and to watch them to read one and watch it, and to see what that amazing thing that you love looks like on the page. It's very available, and it's endlessly educational. I still do it myself, because I will often watch a movie and think, what did that look like on the page? And how do you write that? So I would say that that's actually a tool that's just available to anyone, most people who have the internet and movies. There's so many great interviews with great screenwriters that you can find online, where they talk about their process, and we're all so different. People hide themselves in hotel rooms for weeks at a time, or people write in loud bars, or you know what I mean, or a lot of people talk about the one person or two people in their life that they trust to really read their work and be honest without being, not your mom. Not someone who's like, it's great, yay for you, and not someone who's going to be like, you suck, because they're jealous. You know what I mean? And not someone who's going to say, oh my God, it's great, I loved it. You want someone who is going to be honest, kind, and really read it. And so the constant search in my life for people like that, friends you trust who are smart, I guess is the short version, is also. So that was like 5 different things I just said, but those are some of the things that help me be a better writer. And it's also, I'm always becoming a better writer by doing all of those things.
Great, awesome, thank you so much. I want to keep it brief though. Okay, thank you.
All right. I just want to say one last thing. One of my favorite choices that you make in this movie is the killing of the dog.
It's so brutal, I know.
I know, it's like, oh man, he just totally killed that homeless guy. What? He killed the dog? This is a horrible person.
I know, and that's what's funny in that obviously very dark way, is that somehow that seems worse.
So worse, yeah, it does.
It's like, no, he just killed a person and he's killing people, but like, not the dog. But I cringe every time I have to watch that scene, because it's sound design. There's a crunch that they did that's like a dog's bone crunch that just kills me. I'm a huge fan of dogs, so it gets me every time too.
Yes, very great choice. All right, Guinevere, you're wonderful. We love you. Thank you so much for everything you've done for UVU this semester. And it's just been great. So everyone, big hand. And thank you for everything.
Okay, good night.
And good night. Have a good sleep.
Thanks. Bye.